Hi fam, it's Dylan's mum Deborah. This is Dyl Friends.
It gives you a back rub and says, it's going well, Brian. It's special.
Get comfortable, be uncomfortable. Just keep showing up and find a way.
Cam was so nervous he couldn't swallow water.
Handed him a sheet of paper with 6 names and said, "Chief, we've got to cut these 6 blokes."
Wow, shut up. I've just been barbed by a stingray, mate.
I'm just yelling at him like, you saved my life, you saved my life, you saved my life. Thank you, thank you.
I spent the last, I think it was a couple of weeks in jail. The deepest, darkest moments often bring about our biggest highs.
Hey, Damien, how are you?
I'm good.
Mate, welcome to the show. This is unbelievable. It's so good to finally have you in.
Thanks for having me. It's I was going to say, it's my first podcast. So I'm quite excited about it. So,
it's unbelievable. So last week, a mutual friend of ours, Carly, who's an absolute star, she called me. She's like, I've got Dimmer for the show. And I was like, why the hell would he agree to actually coming on this podcast? This is unbelievable. And it was a really exciting time for me, but also a really bad time because it was like this massive, incredible opportunity. It's sort of like grand final week and I'm building up like, fuck, I got Damien Hardwick on the podcast and I started to get sick.
Yes.
And I started to get really crook and I was like, I don't know what I should do. Should I call him and say, mate, like, I don't want to get Dimmer sick, but also I don't want to miss out on the opportunity. I don't know how long he's in town for. And I was in this massive conundrum where I was like, I think I've got to tell him, like, I don't want to get him crook, don't want to like him to hate me for the rest of my life. And we told you, ended up postponing the show.
Yep.
But then it hit me as well. I was like, this is a 3-time premiership coach that teaches elite athletes that no matter what happens, you have to perform. And I was like, is he just going to think now that I'm like, where did it sit with you?
Well, in fairness, I did say to Carly, I was a bit prepared to send over a glass of cement to harden the fuck up, to be fair. But yeah, it was one of those things. I thought, oh, listen, it's your little repertoire here, so I'll just sort of sit there. And I'm pretty relaxed now. Obviously, I'm unemployed, so I've got nothing else to do. So any day where I have something, to bide my time over with, I'm happy to do. So it worked out well.
It did. It worked out well. So I'm going to think now that you thought I was weak as piss, which is I'm
There's
sure
no
you're
thinking I've been honest and up front. You are as weak as piss.
Yeah, I am weak as piss. Okay, fantastic. Now let's deep dive into that. Hey, you finished up. Talk us through your last few weeks. What have you been doing?
Yeah, it's been challenging, to be fair. It's funny when you get into a routine, like, you sort of think about the one thing that footy does is really routine orientated, and all of a sudden you take that away and it's amazing how quickly you enjoy the first couple of days and it's like, oh, what am I going to do now? So, I was one of those guys, 5 o'clock, so I used to get up at 5 and start my day and work into my day. And I remember texting Tim Livingston and Blair Hartley. I said, this sleep thing, how long has this been going on for? So, the first couple of days I slept until about 8 o'clock and I felt like half the day was gone. So I made the fatal mistake of trying to get back involved in golf, which sounded like a good idea at the time, but obviously as a coach it's incredibly frustrating when you don't pick up a club and you're automatically a US Master or a chance of playing in the US Masters. So it was it was a quick realisation that I'm not too good at this. So there's some challenges in that game, but I think it's something I'll eventually work my way through.
Yeah, it's a big one, golf. As we were chatting off air before, it's something that I picked up playing and I think it's one of those things you can never master. It's a absolute nightmare, but it's such an addictive sport because it can really test you. And a good thing about it for me too, like I love the social aspect of it. I love walking side to side with people, having conversations, love getting into nature, being near the trees, all those bits and pieces too, which is a little bit weird, but for me it does wonders for the mental side.
Yeah, you're a little bit different to me. I like bringing people down to my level.
Oh, okay.
So I'm more about the sledging and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But it was funny because I sat there, I actually played by myself because I rang up a couple of guys, no, we've got work. It's like, I forgot about this thing. And anyway, I wasn't playing too well sort of off the tee and the coach of me started to come out. So I started to look around and set up my little iPhone and got my swing on there and trying to figure out what I was doing and then went home and obviously we've got this still on my computer, this sports coach package. Started coding my swing and trying to look at other videos about how I was doing it and I thought this is going to drive me absolutely insane if I sit there and invest in this too much. But it was actually it was quite fun and enjoyable day, to be fair. But yeah, it's one of those things I'm looking forward to improving in. But I think it's going to be a long process still, to be perfectly honest.
Oh, mate, you're a psycho. That's incredible. You've got to get a coach. That's
I've
impressive.
got to relax, I think, with that sort of stuff. But
on
anyway.
the really interesting point that you brought up, because when I finished playing sports, I went from like primary school playing footy and high school playing footy, and I don't think a lot of people realise this, that maybe you're realising now, is the fact that you get told where you need to be your whole life. And the biggest challenge, 100% the biggest challenge, wasn't the community side of things, wasn't anything. It was organising my life. Like, I went from going, all right, I know I've got this weekend off in 6 months, I know I can go away, to going, I don't know what day it is, I don't know what's on tomorrow, I don't even know what I'm doing, I don't even know how to get a job, I don't know how to do these things. Like, the planning, and is that been something for you that's been like a really interesting time?
Yeah, it has, because I'm normally, like you said, the routine aspect has been really, really strong in my life since I was 18 years of age. I'm now, going on 50, and I've sort of been in footy my whole life, or 2/3 of my life. So the challenge for me was waking up and then starting to, okay, well, what do I have to do? So I had a couple of days where I sort of decompressed and relaxed, and then I thought, okay, I'm not very good at this, sitting there and having nothing to do. So then I started booking some appointments with people, catch up with some guys, play golf, mistake, but then move through that aspect of it, because one of the things that I've always spoken about our players is the routine aspect, about understanding who you are and what you do. But all of a sudden, footy was, such a big part of my life, and it sort of defined me in a way, because I was in that cycle of what it was. So it was a real challenge after the first couple of days about, getting back to some form of normality about what that looks like for Damien. I've called myself in the third person. This is for me, first and foremost. So it's still one of those things. I had a caught up with a mate yesterday, and then I thought, okay, I've got the afternoon free. I don't want to book too much in because I need to sit there and make sure I've got something to do the next day. So it's been a little bit challenging learning how to relax, and I think it's something I'll become better at. But also I need to find out what my next purpose is about moving forward and getting my teeth stuck into something, because otherwise I'll drive myself insane.
It's an interesting point, mate, and I'm so excited for you to see what you put your energy into next, whether that be, I don't know what you're planning on doing, but it's someone like yourself that's as highly driven and been in such a high testing environment for so long. I don't know if I'm going to be breaking your heart here, but you'll never be able to relax. And I don't think that there's ever a time when you can fully, not you personally, but just people in general that love that sort of thing. We hear so much about balance, and balance is really important. But for me, I used to think, I need to relax, I need to have time to do things. But I found myself feeling less calm and less structured when I was not busy. So I think for me, it's just like finding out what you like to do the best.
Yeah, it's exactly right. And I'm the same. Like, I sit there and you can sit on the couch for a period of time, but then it's like, okay, well, what am I doing now? And, I'm fortunate I've got, I sort of obviously finished, and then I thought, okay, I'm probably never going to have an opportunity to see the NBA playoffs again. So I jetted off to Denver to catch a couple of games, and then I thought I'd go to Europe after that. But obviously Trent's 300s came, in a critical time, and I thought, I've got to come back and be a part of that and see such a person that was, such a big part of my life and celebrate that game. And, I'm fortunate enough to go to Europe, next week, which will be good, which will keep me busy for 7 or 8 weeks and go from there.
Where are you going? Is that a feet up sort of holiday, or is it a one-way ticket? What's the plan?
I sort of want to come back at the start of finals, because obviously AFL finals is pretty special as well. And I'm just going to see as much as I can. European summer, I've never had the opportunity to do it, and see another part of the world that I'll probably won't get an opportunity to go back to. So I'm going to see as much as I can. I've got this ridiculous backpack I've bought that I'm sitting there regretting that. I thought, you're not 23 anymore, so
well, you got to do it.
I've got to do it, but it's like, come on. So I've got the backpack packed, and I was sort of looking at it the other day, and I thought, God, I've got to feel like a real tosser, I reckon, over there catching trains. The funniest thing about it is my kids are over there at the same time.
Oh, my God.
I was sort of trying to give them some space. I said, we're catching up in Prague, and we're catching up in Greece and all that sort of stuff. So it's going to be quite cool to see them and catch up with them overseas as well, which is going to be a bit of an eye-opener for me, I'm sure.
There's a real, I've never met you before and had the chance to chat to you, but there's a real humility about the way you're talking at the moment. It's like you're literally starting your life again. Is that what it feels like for you?
It does, because I've been involved in such a long period of time, and ever since I was, I probably entered the AFL system, I think it's 17 as a 17-year-old, at North Melbourne, and went through my life, involved in the industry, and all of a sudden you're at the other end of it, and it's like, okay, well, what else is out there now? And so that's going to be a challenge for me. And don't get me wrong, I love footy sort of thing, so I'm always going to be a footy guy, and where that leads me, I'm not too sure. But I am looking forward to having the 7 or 8 weeks of just being a traveller and looking forward to what I can actually gather from the world. And I've been to Europe previously, but it's always been in winter, so it's a little bit different there. But to see it in summer and sit there and wake up and put a pair of shorts and a T-shirt on and just walk through cities is going to be incredible, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, mate, I think it's a really exciting time. Like we had lucky enough here to talk to a lot of people, and Job Watson came on the show.
Yeah.
And he spoke about, sort of his experiences with footy. And one of the things that stood out the most that I really resonated with, but, on a bigger level for you guys, was the fact that you've achieved so much in footy. And he spoke about the time when the ban was on and he moved to the States.
Yeah.
And he went away, I think he was in the US, and he was like in some country town out in the US, meeting some people, had no idea who he was. And he had this conversation with people going, this was the first time he realised, fuck, the universe is so much bigger than we think. And as big as like what you've achieved and what we'll talk about today, there's such another big word out there that we really don't get to see.
Yeah, it is. And that's the exciting part about it. And, it's funny, you're sort of going overseas and, I look at some concerts that are there, Bruce Springsteen and Coldplay's playing over there as well. And I sort of sit there as a middle-aged white man. I can't go to Marvel Stadium and dance, sort of thing. But over there I thought, maybe I can. Maybe I can let myself go a little bit, sort of thing. Because you always think, who's watching you? What are they going to laugh at and all that sort of stuff. So it's going to be it'll be great fun, actually. I'm really looking forward to it. What I'm not looking forward to, I think the tickets for Springsteen were like €500, which is going to, Jesus, you'd want to be bloody good for €500. So anyway, we'll see how we go.
Finishing up, who was the first person you spoke to about floating the idea of finishing up coaching?
You're talking from Richmond point of view?
Or anything.
Yeah, my old
like,
man. I rang my parents. I actually didn't ring. I went up and saw my folks. Because obviously Alex, my partner, I'd spoken to her about it, and I'd sort of felt that way for a number of weeks. And then I went up and saw my old man, and my old man's going on, 80 now, sort of thing. So they're in a farm up in Tullarook, or a hobby farm, so to speak. So I went up there and surprised him, didn't tell him I was coming. So I found him asleep in the recliner, as you normally do at that age. He didn't have a shotgun or anything in his lap, so that was a good one for me. And thought Mum would be there, but no, Mum's at the local races, sort of thing. So she's enjoying her life, and sort of spoke to him about what I was thinking and what I was feeling. And obviously, it's been a big part of their life as well. And and then they're getting to the age where they don't travel down to Melbourne, don't travel to the city and during the night and all those sort of things. So they hadn't been to a game, I think, this year really. But he could understand, I don't want to say the toll, but it is a really, really challenging job. And I was very fortunate to do what I do, but I sort of thought, the time's right to leave a footy club, and, they're in a pretty good spot. Got some really good coaches, got some terrific players, but I feel like I'd had my time, and I spoke to my dad through that process, and he was a coach, he coached me all through my junior career. And, it was funny. It's not often you see your parents cry, if that makes sense. And I'm going to get emotional speaking about this as well, but how much they'd done for me and what they'd given me to allow me to achieve my goals. And I think it was just important to tell them first and foremost and get their opinion. And look, they'll always support anything I do. And they were just happy that I go out at a time that felt right. Like I wanted to go out feeling great about what I'd achieved and the club that I'd been at, rather than resenting the club. So, which I'd seen a lot of other coaches go out that way as well. So it was important for my one like that. Mum, mind you, didn't come back from the races. She was having a good time there. So I spoke to her on the phone that night. But they were probably the first people I spoke about.
I'm a new father, and I think that this whole notion of like a father-son, father-mother relationship for me is so crazy now that you have your own kids. And I think you realise, like, when you look at your own kids and you speak to your parents, like when there's that weird age where you become your parents' parent.
Yep.
And you gather this like new relationship of how much love there actually is and how much support there actually is from what your parents have seen. And for you, that would even be, where you are now, having both ends of the spectrum, being a father, having your own parents. How special is that relationship both ways of each other? It
is special because it's like I sort of look back when I was, and my kids are now 20 plus, all my kids. I've got 3, and I'll speak about them in a second. But I remember when I was a young guy growing up at the age of 20 to 30, you sort of lose track of your parents. You're sort of living your own life. You're sort of understanding what you're about. You've got I started a young family, but then after 30, you start to gravitate back to your parents. One, because you need babysitters first and foremost for your kids, but all of a sudden you start to realise what's happening. And it's funny, my kids are like that now. I'm in their life, but it's amazing how their partners and their partners' parents and that have become a little bit more important as compared to you. And It's funny. It's like a Seinfeld episode. It's like I'm still holding on to the jeans aspect, but it's like, when do I turn from jeans to chinos? It's like that sort of attitude that is happening to me, and my parents have hit that. But it's funny because the next person, the people I spoke to after that were my kids, and kids are very, very different. So I spoke to my middle daughter first. She's quite emotional about this thing. So as soon as I said it, she broke up into tears and all that and was quite upset. Then I spoke to my son, who's my eldest, and as blokes do, we're very matter of fact, yep, basically trying to get off the phone before he's on it, sort of thing. And then I spoke to my youngest daughter, who's probably the one that, for example, if I leave my house, she is the one that I will give all the instructions to. She's the one that is very, very matter of fact, and she spoke through it, understood it, and then worked me way through it. She's studying to be a nurse, so she's really, really smart, and she was giving me advice, sort of thing. So it's funny how you get three different reactions from three different people within your family, but it's amazing the relationship you have with your kids and what that means to you. And you know, I sort of look at it now, and footy's taken a lot away from those kids. You know, it is a really tough life on them. They, as much as I could get to their sport and their things that they were trying to do, it was really, really challenging at various stages. And now I'm trying to push myself back onto their life, and they're busy, sort of thing. So, but it's been a really good thing. You know, I got lunch with them this afternoon, which is cool, which I haven't done before. And it's things like that you don't take for granted, but you realise how special they are now, which is really important.
So you're a music man?
Love my music.
So Cat Stevens?
Yes.
You know the song?
Cats in the Cradle.
Cats in the Cradle.
Yep.
Like the lyrics of that.
I thought you were going to break out into song.
No,
there.
I wasn't going to sing it. No, I wasn't. I won't ruin it for you. But that song is such a interesting. Well, it's just true, right? For everyone. And if anyone hasn't heard that song, have a listen to it. But I found that
as a father, you get very emotional. Don't you?
And like even as a son of a dad, like I look at that now and I go, oh my God, like Dad, you know, I wanted you to have a kick with me back in the day. Yeah. You were busy, but now you want to hang out with me. I'm busy. Yeah. Like it's
exactly right. It's a great song. It's a great realization of what happens. You know, and it's sort of the stuff you look back and, you know, my old man did everything for me, really, sort of thing. I remember sitting there playing basketball with him and all those sort of things. And you know, it's funny with footy, I probably did that as much as I could with my young fella, BJ, and my girls, but it was really, really challenging with, you know, weekends and how overwhelming the job can be at various stages.
Building relationships has been something that everyone knows you for. I feel like you were the first person that was like the title relationship coach. Now, I know that might be a buzzword, but in saying that, I've spoken to a lot of players and a lot of friends of mine that have been coached under you and genuinely say that was something that your best thing was at. Was it something that you actively did? Did you always do it? Was it something you were always good at, even as a teammate, as a young coach? Like, where did it come from?
Oh, it was funny. It's something I had to improve on, I think, and I started to realise, you know, the X's and zeros, and everyone says it now, the X's and zeros are important, but the relationship you build with the players is really important. And it's funny, it sort of brought about my downfall in a way too, because you build this incredible emotional state with the group of players that you have, and you go on this journey. And, you know, I look back when I first started was 2011, I think was my first year, or 2010. 2010. I'm so glad you know, I don't even know. But and you form this journey, and you go through this journey with these players, and then all of a sudden those players that you've worked so hard with and developed such great relationships with leave. You know, I'd seen guys get married, have kids and all that sort of stuff, and you become like part of their family. Then all of a sudden, you know, Shane Edwards retires, Chris Newman retires, Kane Lambert retires, and so you start to feel a little bit of a void. Now, don't get me wrong, there's players that are coming into the football club as well, but the journey's different, and that's when the challenges start to evolve. And you know, I started to get really, really emotional towards the back end of my career as coach of Richmond, because all the players that I've loved and have broken bones for me and blood, sweat and tears are now started to leave. And, you know, every retirement speech, I was getting more emotional as it went along. And, you know, I still talking about it now, you know, I sort of half well up in a way, but it became harder and harder to see those guys go. Not that I didn't love the players that were coming in as much, but the fact of the matter is, it's just really, really challenging. And that emotional turmoil of having that emotional state and then seeing those players dissipate along the way became really, really hard. I thought I was coaching well, but I wasn't coping as well as what I would like with that change. So that was one of the things that sort of eventually I thought, you know what, it's probably time to step back.
When you say coping with the relationships, the big things about coaching, because we see at the moment, like, look, it wouldn't probably be a job that I'd be putting my hand up for, not because, like, I personally want to say it's an incredible job to be doing. Like, I don't want people to think that, like, I don't want people to say that it's not something it is, because I think Kane Corn said something the other day, like, coaching it's a privilege, like, and pressure is a privilege. Like, that's something that I wish I knew a little bit more about when I played. Like, the pressure is a privilege because you're in a position that is incredible and you get to do incredible things. But how challenging is being a senior coach of a footy club?
Oh, it is challenging. Don't get me wrong. It's incredibly rewarding as well. And the thing is, I say this to the players all the time. We're very fortunate to win 3 premiership cups, but it's not that sort of stuff that I'll remember. I'll be known for it, if that makes sense. But the things that if I remember along the way are the things about the journey. The great times we had on camps, or great things that happened within our footy club of jokes and periods within the year that we just had a great time. And they're the things that make coaching great. The challenge is we're measured on outcome, and that's really, really hard, because the fact of the matter is, within your 4 walls, you can sit there and be as happy and as go-lucky as you want, but the fact of the matter is there's this big wide world out there that effectively is trying to bring you down, because that's what society does in a way. They're always trying to rip you apart or trying to rip your club apart. And the really, really good clubs, and ours was at this stage, are really, really strong about what they want to set out to achieve and the people within the organisation. But there's people with, on the outside, they're always trying to tear those walls down. So that's the really challenging part. Once you're inside the Richmond Footy Club, it's all great. But sometimes when things aren't going so well, that's when it becomes incredibly challenging. And that's where you find a little bit about yourself. Yeah. I reckon in 2016, when things were going really, really poorly, that's when I was at my absolute worst. And that's when you sort of, funnily enough, you find out how good a coach you are, because I had to redefine myself, had to reconfigure myself. And don't get me wrong, I didn't do it myself. I had a lot of people around me that were willing to help. But that's when you start to figure out, well, these are the things that make Damien Hardwick the best version, but also these are the things that you really need to work on to get better.
Unbelievable. I'd absolutely love to talk about that. And this is not, like, you don't understand how excited I am to talk about this, because I think the story of the Richmond Footy Club from an outside perspective of the 2010 Brendan Gale coming on, that famous Footy Classified interview of the league's 5-year succession plan of 75,000 members free and 3 flags in the next 10 years. Fast forward to 2016, doesn't look like it's really at a pivotal point. Now, without my biggest pet peeve at the moment, without ruining this whole thing, this is just friends chatting.
Yep.
I hope I can call you that, is clubs not sticking together.
Yeah.
And I think you get to this point where you go through so much shit, and I go, wow, if a few clubs just held on a bit more and got through that, what would the outcome have been?
Yeah.
And 2016, I get goosebumps. I'm not even a Richmond supporter, but you're the only club that have actually stuck with each other from a pivotal moment. And I just want to go, what happened in that period for you? Just go ham.
It's interesting because it is a little bit challenging. It's a little bit different. So we had made 3 finals before that 2016 season. So we'd won like 15 games, I think 2 out of the 3 years. And so we won a lot of games but lost our first elimination final. There's some really good sides playing. So we fell short. And so then in 2016, I thought, okay, there's 1 or 2 things got to happen. Either we've got to improve our talent base, which we didn't really do. We drafted. Or the other option is I thought I've just got to get harder on these guys, which is not something I would normally do. I can be hard, but I can also be fair. But I decided to drive these guys harder than I'd ever have, So everything was designed about trying to get us to win the flag. And so as soon as that expectation became so high, the pressure becomes so great, and it just created this conundrum where I was pushing players and they just weren't responding. And so I'd push harder and harder and harder. And so I became this coach that, well, one, it wasn't me. I was trying to be someone that I generally wasn't, because my sort of thoughts are I was always about growth, always trying to improve and stuff like this. But the ogre that came out of me that year was driving performance so hard. And we often speak about, and Emma would have spoken about with you, the demon of expectation. As soon as that you start to become outcome-based, the pressure becomes so high and the players are on a knife's edge the whole time. So they're not relaxed. They're not going to play at their very best. And they're just scared shitless the whole time. So as soon as they make a mistake, they go into their shells, and then they're worried about that mistake, and then they'll make another mistake. it was just a horrible year, for me, coaching first and foremost, but then also for our playing group. So, I still remember that day, me and Trent became closer, and me and Trent were both in tears, and we just talked about how, listen, we've got to get through this and we've got to become better. Trent was thinking about stepping down as captain and walking away from our club, and I was probably a little bit the same, but then we sort of sat there and made a pact about, okay, well, let's get through this. Let's change, first and foremost, what we're doing, but let's redefine who we are. And so we got to work on that, and the club, as you know, were good enough to send me across to Harvard to do this course and find out, what made me the very best version of myself. And, when it simplistically came down to it, I sort of looked at it. I was coaching my daughter's under-13 basketball side back then, and I really, really loved it. And, that was the sort of best version of me coaching. Coaching was all about learning and teaching, but also about fun at the same time. And I still maintain, if you can coach under-13 girls basketball, you can coach an AFL side, I guarantee you. That was harder than coaching the boys. But I came up with a philosophy too, which is this course was $15,000, but I came up with keep them moving. So I was at my best when I was always walking around. If I sit in a chair, I'm an accountant by nature, so I'll analyse data and information, all that sort of stuff, but I'm not around my coaches, I'm not around my players. And keep them moving was keep my players moving forward as well. So always challenge them to get better in a certain aspect of what they are, but also understand that their strengths are what guaranteed and what got them to the game of AFL footy in the first place. So let's just focus on that and let's work harder on that, not worry about your deficiencies as such. But then also my kids and my family, keep them moving forward as well as much as I can. So that motto that I got from that course, it's still with me today. It's still the number one thing that I work, keep them moving. So if I'm walking around, if I'm sitting on a couch, I'm no good. But if I'm walking around, talking to people, learning, growing, it makes me a better coach first and foremost, but a better person as well.
Unbelievable. When did things start happening at the footy club that started to correlate into these? Because I hate that thing of like a pivotal moment, because there's millions of different times. But was there a period that it started to just tick along?
I think when we first got there, we started some initial things like the Triple H, the hero hardship highlight, which people know about and how important that became. But
who introduced that? Was that something you...
It's something I read. I read a book by John Gordon, I think it was. I can't remember the name of it, but it was a gentleman by the name of Arthur Smith who coached the Atlanta Falcons, used it with his playing group. And I thought, that's really, really interesting. And it was amazing. I went first, Trent went second, and the one that really, really blew me away was Brandon Ellis. Like, I'd coached Brandon for a lot of time, and I love Brandon. He's one of my favourite players. And he spoke about some things in his Triple H that I was embarrassed as a coach that I didn't know this about Brandon. And so I knew him on a superficial level, but I didn't know Brandon, the person first and foremost. And that's what this brought about to our footy club. And the connection pieces from that became stronger and stronger. And it wasn't so much that Brandon got up and spoke about that with the playing group. It was then the conversations that ensued from that, around the lunch table, and that's what brought our group closer together. But then we just wanted to have fun as much as we can. So everything we did, every drill we did, we always wanted to make sure we had some fun aspect to it. So listen, we want to play fast. We want to, ensue chaos about when we go about that, the Richmond style of game. So let's do that. At the end of the day, I've got a system of style of play that I want to implement, but within that system, the reality is that'll keep us in games, but the talent's going to win us games. So I want you to bring your strengths. The system is there designed to implement something that'll give us a chance to win games, but the reality is, boys, you guys are going to win the games by playing to your absolute strengths. And the players sort of gravitated to that, and we won a lot of footy games as a result. But one of the biggest things I wanted to make sure is that the players wanted to come to work. We know how hard AFL footy or elite sport is, and I wanted to make sure they walked in, even if we lost, walking in a little bit downcast, but knowing, you know what, by the end of the day, I walk out of here, I'm going to walk away here with a smile, and I'm going to walk away from this place knowing that we've got the answers to make us better the next day. And that was one of the things that I sort of wanted to make. I sort of sat down and thought, this is the legacy that I want to leave. If I can do anything, it's about you walk into the place knowing that you want to come there, but more importantly, you walk away knowing that we've got the answers, and I walk out with a smile that day.
We've seen that since, a lot of people, and the people that you have in the four walls at that footy club, I'm lucky enough to be close with Kane Lambert, and I think, I don't know one person who could say a bad word about him. I want to get your thoughts on him in a second.
Yeah.
But with that notion of Brando getting up, and I've, again, lucky enough to know Brando, had him on the show, shared his Triple H and the same impact that, it had on him versus it had on his teammates as well when he did that. But how much have you found that authenticity, that vulnerability, that friendship, that connection, the relationships build and are contagious once one person can kickstart it? And by yourself, bringing something in like that, how much like that snowballs effects to everyone and just comes so much more deep and meaningful?
Yeah, well, it's massive. Well, everyone craves connection. And it's funny. It's you sort of look back in COVID, and that's what COVID did. It actually took away the connection piece of everyone. We all of a sudden couldn't converse with people or walk or go to the pub with people. And it's amazing how we sort of grabbed something and ran with it. But, the connection piece, and we're so unconnected these days with social media and text message. Like I sit there, and one of the things I try not to do is I'd rather ring the person than text, if that makes sense. Because with text, it's quite easy and you can just throw it out there. Yeah, and it's a simple thing to do, but actually having the conversation with person, it leads to something. Whereas a text message just goes back and forth, but you're not really invested in it as such. And so that was what that connection piece did. So our players stopped sitting around on their phones and started to sit there and have conversations about everyday life or, historical events or events that were happening or possibly in the future. And it's funny, it sort of gravitated to that. We changed the way our footy club worked as well. So we moved our coaches from downstairs, which is the performance aspect of footy, to upstairs. So all our offices are up around the lunchroom, around the players' lounge and all that sort of stuff. And we sort of found, much to our detriment really, because we couldn't get any work done, the players were sitting there having lunches in our office. But that was more important. End of the day, X's and O's are great, but the fact of the matter is if you're stronger in those relationships, the players are going to do more and play more together. So it was one of the best moves we made from that aspect.
How important to you is with Richmond, and I know that the footy department have obviously done such an incredible job, but was like the support of having people like Peggy O'Neill, Brendan Gale, Livingston, Blair Hartley.
Yeah.
How much is a footy club actually a business? And the point of if you don't have a good structure from the top, does it flow down? Because I'm assuming at that period in 2016 where we have seen a lot of those decisions actually go the other way where coaches depart the club. Yep. Was there conversations that you ever had with Brendan and them at that time being like, we're going to back you in? And to my point before, I was actually thinking in my head when you went over to Harvard, I was like, I wonder if the Harvard trip actually did a lot for you. You're getting obviously your motto out of it that you live by today, but was it more the fact that they wanted to invest in you and go, hey, we believe in you, we're sending you here, that actually got you that?
Yeah, it did. No, I'm very fortunate. And footy clubs have a big four. There's the CEO, the footy manager, the list manager and the coach sort of thing. They're effectively, and the president, sorry. Yeah. So it's a big five sort of thing really without the coach. But the strength of those people are what makes organisations great. Footy clubs aren't really defined until there's a bump in the road. You don't measure yourself as a coach or a club until there's a pivotal point in your organisation where in one or two ways. And the easy thing for Richmond to do, and it's what everyone wanted, we'll sack Dimmer. Yep. That's the reality. But they thought I could coach. They had a really good understanding of what I was about. They knew that I had some warts and I had to improve those, as everyone does. But as you said, that investment in me, and I remember I had a conversation with Brendan. I was holidaying with my family in Queensland, and that there was a focus on footy group, and I was actually genuinely worried. And Brendan said, "Don't worry, we're gonna be okay. We're gonna get through this. You'll be fine." And to hear that from your CEO, who could have quite easily got rid of all the pressure by just getting rid of me, and that's why I love the guy, and that's why that guy and Peggy O'Neill and there's some other people as well. Tim Livingston, Blair Hartley, been incredibly important to me, but that's the reason our footy club's great. It's not because of me or the players. It's because they're so stable and got a great understanding of what a great footy club is. And the mistake clubs make, in my opinion, I've been very fortunate. I've gone to a lot of footy clubs and so I've got a pretty good understanding about what makes great footy clubs. It's the people. And the more you invest in people, the more they're going to give to that football club. And that's the great thing about me stepping aside. And I'd spoken to Brendan about this a little bit, about what it looks like from a succession planning point of view. And clubs, what they do is they rip clubs apart and they start again. But there's no reason to do that. If you've got a relatively successful program, which we have, And you know what? Well, I'm a part of it, but I'm not the overriding part of it, if that makes sense. You know, we've got some wonderful coaches, Andrew McQualter, Xavier Clark, David Teague, Ben Rutten. They've got a great understanding of how Richmond operates. So I can step aside and then one of those guys can just fill the void. Nothing really has to significantly change. They'll make some of their own changements, but they've got a great understanding of how Richmond operates. And that's the most pleasing aspect for me, is that I felt I could step aside and one of those guys would step up and take the void.
It's awesome. Have you, I'm assuming you have, but read the book Good to Great?
I have many years ago. Yeah,
well, it's a similar sort of philosophy. Yeah, it's sort of like you leave just knowing that the system's in place.
Exactly.
The business is part of it.
And you don't get me wrong, you've got to have a good system.
Yeah.
If you're not a winning system and you're trying to implement that doesn't work. But that's the great thing about our footy club, and that's why, you know, Peggy O'Neill leaves. They've got a fantastic president in John O'Rourke that just steps up and continues to do what Richmond do.
Footy planning now, so on field, okay, because there is a level of coaching that actually is strategic, and there is on there. To win 3 flags in a style that now a lot of Richmond supporters would know is that come forward pressure defence. Was that obviously a change? Because there's a part where to win a flag, I love the analogy of, and I hope this is true, where I don't know if you said this or someone, but it's like you can't go on the trend that's already going, because by the time you master that trend, it's already going to be gone and the new one will come. So I felt like Richmond really came up with that come forward defence, handball forward, because everyone was going backwards to go around those bits and pieces. Yeah. Did that change in 2016? Was it something you were already trying to do? What do you think got you to the first success in 2017?
Well, it was more... It's funny because defensively we didn't really change a great deal about what we did, but offensively we did. And it sort of is a little bit about us as people as well. The saying you would have heard a lot, embrace imperfection. Yeah. And that's what we did. So instead of, you know, I tried to get our guys in those early years that I playing a perfect brand of footy, you know, controlling the ball, control our defence through our offence. But the reality is when push comes to shove and the pressure of finals comes in, it's really, really hard to play that way unless you are incredibly skilled. You know, Hawthorn they were able to sustain that brand of footy. We weren't. So we went to work on a little bit, okay, well, if we do this, what does it look like? We want to be a forward footy side. We want to just keep moving the ball forward and then defensively get behind it. And so we didn't want to be perfect. We wanted to say to the guys, listen, at the end of the day, if you just kick that ball, you know, long or to a contest, it becomes predictable to us. So we know where it's going. Now, the opposition do too, but if we're good enough at defending behind that ball, we're going to be okay. So a lot of those things that we styled our game on were effectively what we're styling our personality of our footy club on too. You know, the embracing imperfection of who we are. We're not perfect. We've got strengths in this facet of our life and there's some areas that we can improve, but understand this is what we're good at. So don't sit there and put all your 80% of your time into the 20% that you're trying to improve. Let's continue to put 80% of our time into the 80% we're good at. Let's continue to delve into that, continue to invest in that, and continue to make sure that we play a style of game that suits the players that we've got. And so it came from that.
2017 as well with that flag. I remember the time being, because the one part you said before is about a brand of footy that holds up in September, because it is such a different game, September footy. And I think Adelaide at that time were a very offensive team, which is, as you said, a lot really hard to do when the heat's on in that moment.
Yeah, and we sort of spoke about the one great thing is with our defence. Like our offence, we didn't feel like opposition could take that away, but we felt with our defence we could take away, like our one would defensively would take away an offensive side's impact, if that makes sense. Like our defence could control their offence, and that's one thing we went to work on, and the guys really bought into that. You know, Adelaide were one of the best ball movement sides throughout the course of the year and just kicking 100 points all the time. But we felt if we defensively could, you know, disrupt a little bit, like once again, all it takes is, you know, I remember telling them a story about there was a team, the LA Rams, called The Greatest Show on Turf. They had this guy, Kurt Warner, and their quarterback would just sling the ball all over the field, and then they come up against Bill Belichick. Now, Bill Belichick knew that he couldn't get to the quarterback, but what he'd do is he'd disrupt the receivers. So he'd come up and the receivers would run their route, but their defense would just smack them at the line of scrimmage, so all their timing was off. And so that was the sort of philosophy that we went with. Listen, the ball carrier will be able to do certain things, but if we take away those receivers or make them disrupt, their patterning and their execution is going to be out. And so that's something we sort of spoke about and went to work with. So it worked reasonably well.
It definitely did. Who were some of the players that, like back in 2017, that obviously you've got your Cotchins, Martins, Rances, players at absolute or outright stars of the competition, but players that for you were first picked in that team that were just doing a role that maybe the outside world didn't see as much?
Yeah, look, that was guys like Castagna, Butler, Rioli, our wingers were really, really important. Brandon played on the wing, and I think it was Camden. God, I can't. Yeah, Camden. Camden McIntosh played on the wing. The perimeter players are really, really important. And the challenge for me as a coach, because those players, they didn't get a lot of stats. You know, like that. Those small forwards would get like between 8 and 12 touches and maybe kick a goal. Every now and then one of them would kick 2 or 3 goals. So we'd always have this package where it would always show the patterns of those guys on the outside, but how their pattern would then reward someone else by getting a possession. Because without those guys, players like Dustin, Shea and Trent and all those guys couldn't be the players that they were. So it's sort of like that, without the sum of the parts type thing. The reality is our system wouldn't be anywhere near as strong if those guys didn't play their role.
Well, I heard a lot about like a sort of role between Kane Lambert and Dustin Martin. Like I don't know if that was as true as what it was, but the fact that, without Kane Lambert, Dustin Martin probably not the best finals player of all time.
Spot on. And
what actually was that? Like what was the...
It's very, very hard to explain.
Yeah.
Even as a coach, we used to call it Barry.
Yeah.
It was a Barry and Larry sort of thing. But Kane probably is the best one. But the reality is Dustin's got some strengths in the game. Offensively, he's incredibly gifted sort of thing. Defensively is where, he's got some... He's okay at it, but it's not his number one strength. So instead of getting Dustin to play as a defensive element of the game, because if we did that, we'd be taking away his strengths. We'd lose the offensive impact. So whereas Kane offensively was okay, but defensively had a great understanding of role clarity about what was required at certain times. And so those two worked in conjunction the whole time. So Dustin could just play, and Kane would basically be thinking for... Now, Dustin's a bad example. He did that for Shea and Shane Edwards and all that sort of stuff, but his role was really, really important because it complemented other roles. And that's what he did really, really well. And that's why those role players are so important to the fabric of not only our footy club, but every footy club really. And probably one of the hardest things for me was when Jason Castagna retired. He was one of the greatest role players, if not the greatest role player as our football club has ever seen. But
wow.
I sort of felt like I didn't protect him enough because our fans would, and I hope this isn't the case, but I've got a funny feeling that social media brought about the downfall of George. It became too hard for him. His love of the game diminished because of the criticism that he would get from fans. And I sort of felt a little bit of guilt towards that because I think internally we sort of gave him the due credit he deserved. But externally, I sort of felt a little bit guilty that maybe I didn't stick up for him enough with regard to the role he played, and didn't give him the due credits that he deserved for making us a great side. But I sort of felt that it got the better of him, and that's the hard thing about our game. People sort of sit there and look at super coach points, kick marks, handballs. Well, Richmond's not really about that. They're about a system that gives them an opportunity to play or a way to play the game that'll give them wins. And by those players playing in those positions will allow other players to flourish and succeed, sort of thing. So
I think anyone that knows football and has a good understanding of the game knows what players are doing what. And you can almost tell nearly sometimes when you think, what is this player doing, how important their role must actually be within the four walls of the club. Now, one of the parts, the questions I love asking people on the pod is in grand finals. Like I'm obsessed with finals footy. I feel like shouldn't even be called AFL. It's a different game. Like those weeks in the end of the year. And it's when there's always like pivotal moments in games that might not ever be seen on the camera, but in reflection you look back and go, fuck, that was a moment that really savoured our footy club and was something that only in the four walls you'd see. You might not even review it because you're off partying in the scenes. Does anything stand out to you in your 3 grand finals? I'm sure there's many parts, but does anything stand out to you and think, geez, that was huge? It might have never been an off-field thing.
What in
the grand finals?
The grand final, there's a couple of things. I think it's more just big phases of play. Like Towner in the 2017 one did this massive tackle on the boundary line. I think one of the Crouch boys, I think he got a hold of, and Towner was one of those guys, a elite role player, played a really specific role for the Tigers, but he's one of those players that you love to have, playing in your side, if that makes sense. And the fact of the matter is, those sort of moments are quite defining, and players feed off that. Players feed off that sort of energy that he had. But probably even the grand final week was, it was quite for our first grand final, and it was sort of not a stressful week, but sort of players get a little bit nervous. And I remember Shane McCurry, who's one of the great men of AFL footy, and a little bit one of those guys, one back, one to the side sort of thing, that doesn't really put himself out there, but is one of the reasons that Richmond is so successful. He said to me, listen, I've got this idea about, the session this week. I wouldn't mind bringing in some African drummers. I thought, Shane, it's the fucking grand final, mate. Why are we bringing in African drummers? But I sort of, what I've learned to do with Shane is I let him have his thing, because he's very, very intelligent, got a great understanding. And what it did is we had this African drumming contingent come in, and so everyone had a drum, and we sat there for 45 minutes just playing these drums, but we're all in beat and all in sync, and it was a really, really good, strong message about all we've got to do is just be in sync on grand final day. Let's not worry about anything else about that. Let's just connect to each other and understand that our beaters is one. We all play off the same, hymn book or same notebook. We're going to be okay. And it was a really, really defining moment for me. I thought, I reckon we're going to win.
Yeah.
African drummers. Who would have thought that they'd sit there and get us over the line for that grand final? But it was a really pivotal point for me that sort of relaxed the players, but it also brought them closer together, and thought, you know what, I think if we do this and we've got a great understanding of what we're all trying to do, we're going to be okay.
So it's so interesting, though, because those analogies stick with people so much, don't they? And forever they'll remember beating the drums together. I have this strange analogy where I remember this clear as day, and to be honest, it's been a really big impact on me in my life, is we had a psychologist come to the club and they brought in sheep's brains. And we walked in the room and there was just like 30 sheep's brains like on the table. And as we were going around, we were labelling all the parts of the brain. Yeah. And there's this one part of the brain called the hypothalamus, which we ended up talking about, which actually dictates the more you activate this part of your brain, actually is being responsible for grit and determination. Yep. And the only way you can activate it is by practicing gratitude. Yeah. Okay. So for me now, thinking about it, that for me was going, wow. So the more grateful I am, the more determined then I'll be, which is why, rookies and people that come from tough backgrounds are often so determined and have so much grit, is because they're so grateful for an opportunity. But it's crazy by the drums and the brains how much you actually remember. If that was just a chat, it would have gone in one ear and out the other. Exactly. Jack Rewalt, he came in here recently. He was actually with Shane McMurray. They were doing something together, and told him that we might have had the chance to have a chat with you. And he said, you've got to ask Dimmer about his favourite motivators, because I know that you're very big on building a theme around games and exactly that, having a theme that people can remember, they can resonate to. You do a lot of reading, as you mentioned before. Where did this come from? When did you start doing it? And what do you think were some of your favourites? Oh, God, it's a good question. I think I started... It was a little bit along the lines of, at the end of 2016 to start to, figure out what my strengths are. And one of the great things that I love, and I think people love overall, is I think I had a school reunion at the end of that year. And I sat there and I caught up with my group of mates as we normally do. We sort of sat in our own sort of thing, but it's the stories. And I sat there, and the funny thing about it is that I know the stories, and I've heard the stories 100 times, and I know the punchline, but I'm still laughing and still, sitting there, and it's around a table like this, and you're leaning in sort of thing. And I thought, it's quite interesting. And the other one that sort of brought about that too was I was fortunate enough that, Daniel Rioli stayed with us for 2 years, 2016, 2017. And, it's funny how bringing a young Indigenous boy and his storytelling is so important to their culture. And having him around the dinner table was amazing, how it brought our family closer together and the storytelling element of like that. And I started to implement that sort of thought process about what that could look like. And so 2017, I sort of defined, okay, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up the season and tell a story and then build on that story every week. And, I think what it does is it brings the players along on the journey, and they sit there and they feed off the story. And so we relate it somehow. Like, for example, it might have been the ability to talk about a role player and every player to play their role. And, I remember one of the better stories I thought I had, well, anyway, my opinion, but
it was after Hurricane Katrina destroyed New Orleans, and they had to play away from their home stadium for the whole year. And effectively they had this player that was pivotal to what New Orleans were about, and he was a special teams guy, and he just hung around, and he'd been on special teams for 8 years, and it was unheard of that a player that was limited ability but would single-handedly stay aside for that long. But what he did, he was a glue guy. He was a guy that brought about a strength of an organisation, made everyone around him better. Anyway, the first game they played back, they were lucky enough to have this guy come and play Drew Brees, which was going to be his first year. And anyway, the very first play of the game, this guy was on special teams. They were playing the Atlanta Falcons, their first home game back at the Superdome, which had housed a truckload of people that were homeless. And so the city came for this game, and this player was on special teams. And anyway, the Atlanta Falcons were going to punt, and the special teams broke through, and he spoiled the ball, and it scored the first touchdown for New Orleans. Anyway, the New Orleans have got one statue around that Superdome, is that guy smothering that ball. And it's ironic that it was the single best role player that redefined their city. And lo and behold, they went on to win the Super Bowl that year, which is an incredible story. And it's amazing that act, I reckon, signified how special role players were, but more importantly, that the city was going to be built off the back of that guy, which was a great story. I think we lost the game that I told that story to. It always fucking happens with that sort of stuff. Because I had this beauty, Queen. I love Queen. Anyway, so 2018 prelim final, we're playing Collingwood, and I did the story about Queen the band and the Live Aid concert, how, Live Aid was obviously to the children of Africa and raise money for those. And anyway, Freddie Mercury at this stage had AIDS and was dying effectively and didn't have long to go, but Queen effectively blew every other big name band away on that day, and I wanted our guys to blow Collingwood away, sort of thing. And so anyway, we went from this story and we walked upstairs, and we had a tribute band playing Queen. So they played 2 songs for us pre-game. Anyway, what? I was going to say, less worried about the Queen tribute band, more worried about the tactics and bloody Mason Cox, who killed us that game. But that was probably one of my best ones, but just didn't win the game. So
where did the cut? So that's weird. That's really weird, I must admit. But then having 2 songs over one, where did that sort of come about? Was it just that you liked them too much?
The guy got carried away, I think, at the end of the day. So we played Bohemian Rhapsody, obviously, but then he went into We Are the Champions. I said, you've gone too early. But it was quite good. It's actually a good idea, but no, didn't get the result I was after, unfortunately.
Is there any other ones when you're a coach and you just go, I think I might have missed on that one?
Oh, there's a lot. There's a lot, but I think the players appreciate the effort.
Just the effort,
yeah. It was funny. I reckon there was one I got through a story, and I could see the guy. I said, listen, guys, I've just fucked this up. Just get out there and win the fucking game. Don't worry about it. And anyway, it just brought about a laugh and all that sort of stuff. But I think that was part and parcel. You know, the players. And it's funny, there's always one player as a coach that you sort of know, and Shane Edwards was always my guy. Shane Edwards was always start like this, but you knew if the story was good or if you were getting them in with a speech that he would start to lean forward and his face would start to tense up. And I thought, that's when you know you're ready to go. So the problem is, as soon as he retired, I was sort of looking for the next one sort of thing. But he was generally the barometer for me half the time.
It's good to know. It's good to know. You need to have those ones in your corner. Yeah. Tom Lynch was awesome to share one with me about, I think it was a 2019 grand final, correct me if I'm wrong, but writing letters to each player. How did that one come about?
It's funny. I think I remember reading, I think it might have been Beck Goddard actually might have done it. And I thought, it's a good idea. And I can't remember exactly when she did it, but I thought, because, every good idea is basically stolen from someone else half the time. But then I sort of wrote it down. But then I love my music. And so I sat there and related the letter, but to the reason I love you and this is why I love this band sort of thing. And so all those...
Oh, you gave a record as well.
And sort of... Because, music to me is one of the great things that whenever I'm down, I've always put on. I've got a couple of songs that I go to and listen to. And
what are they? Do you mind sharing?
One of my big ones, Guns N' Roses, Sweet Child O' Mine. Yeah. So that just... Every time I'm feeling flat, bang, gone. AC/DC, always another big one for me as well. And it just gets me in a better mood, drags me out of it. And it's sort of like a snap one, if that makes sense. So Monday, I don't cope with losses that well, but as soon as I play that music, it sort of snaps me out of it because I know players and people feed off my energy, so I've got to be at my best going in. But then I related those letters to the record and gave them a gift, and it is funny because half the players wouldn't even have a bloody record player and all that sort of stuff. So, I remember Basher Hooley, I reckon, would look at the record and think, what am I doing with this? Yeah. Sort of thing. So where they ended up, those records, I'm not too sure, but I hope they appreciated the time and effort that went into the letter, but also the record that I picked for them.
I'm sure they did. The players that you've played with, it's hard. Like, I know it's very incredibly tough to be able to pinpoint anyone because it goes against everything that we've just spoken about today of role players. But to speak just briefly on a few of the big dogs, you talk someone like Dustin Martin, and I think it's very easy to forget in the time how dominant someone is. But I haven't forgotten. I don't think a lot of Richmond people have forgotten what he's done over that sort of 5-year window of Brownlow, 3 Norm Smith medals, was it 3 Norm Smith medals?
Yeah, 3.
Like that's unheard of. It must be a pretty incredible pinch yourself moment to sometimes sit back and go, wow, I'm coaching this guy.
Well, it is. And I remember when, Francis Jackson drafted him and pick 4, I think he was. And I remember walking up on stage and he had to get in the into his Richmond jersey from, I can't remember where he's from, where we got him.
Bendigo?
Yeah, I remember
Bendigo.
he threw his, I'm not even sure he knew I was a coach, to be fair, at that stage. He threw his top at me and I caught his top and he put the other one on. I sort of thing, shook his hand and all that sort of stuff. But he's a very, very quiet guy. But the one thing, there's reason players are superstars, I reckon. Don't get me wrong, they're talented, but they work harder than anyone else. Like he, as a player, he was naturally talented, but people didn't realise how hard he worked. He had an ability to, every year, he would work on something to get better at something. Whether it was physically or mentally or spiritually, he'd always do something to have an aim over the off-season to get better. And that's why he's one of the greatest players to ever play the game. And, I sit there and watch him and, the things that he does, you're just amazed at, really. We watch from different angles and different bits of vision, and the way he can see the game unfolding and the things that he can do are just special. And the pleasing thing, he texted me the other night and I texted him back and I said, mate, the best thing I've seen from you in the last couple of weeks is he's back. He's smiling, he's back engaged, and he's loving his footy again, which is really important. He's just not quite kicking his goals at the moment, but that'll come. Yeah, he's getting his touches, but it's funny, I said to him, when you start running back, looking at it, I think, he's got it, but then it'll hit the post. And he says, I'm just missing the cream at the moment.
There was one on the weekend that at the Koch's 300th where I think off about 3 steps, he kicked on about 80 metres. And whoever touched on the line, I was like, this is, for the romance of footy, just fucking let it go through.
The art kills us again.
I was like, this is fucking stupid, mate. Just let that go through. That is a genuine joke. In seriousness, he's just an incredible person. One thing I'd love to know from you, you've coached against every team, you've had an incredible out view on team players that hurt you the most on the field. Is there a list of players where you're like, fuck, if I could just have my time coaching this player, I would love to have him on my team?
Yeah, there's always a lot, isn't there? It's funny because I've never tagged, if that makes sense. Yep. There's always players that hurt us, but I always think, okay, we'll just manage that guy as best we can because but there's players I sit there and, like Lynchy's hurt us before and, there's always a couple of guys. Jared Waite.
I love Jared Waite.
He used to always kill us at Carlton. He killed us. And then even in North Melbourne, he went and played that final. I think he kicked 5. Yeah. Every year he used to kill us.
Kicked 9 on the weekend for Benalla.
Oh, did he really? Yeah. Is he still playing?
He's still playing.
Jesus. But there was always players that always hurt us, and you sort of always knew they were going to hurt us for some unknown reason. I don't know what it was. But it's the same as sides that always Richmond have struggled against. North Melbourne, funnily, are a side that Richmond have struggled against. St Kilda will either win or they'll belt us for some unknown reason. I don't know what it is, but there's always sides that against other sides always challenge. But there's always been players, and you sort of love to coach. And I was fortunate enough to coach that there was a
Vic game.
Yeah, Vic game.
Yeah,
which was
the fire relief.
Yeah, which was just awesome to see those players and Scotty Pendlebury, those type of players. And I remember the midfield at one stage was Fife, Dangerfield, someone else, like Jets, but they weren't getting it done. So he had to kick those guys out and get the next tier in, which were Koch and Martin. And it's like, oh, geez, I wouldn't mind coaching this side for 22 weeks. It'd be a good result.
Yeah, that was fantastic. I remember that game. It was really cool. Mate, what's happening with you now? What else are you doing outside of footy? Because if you don't mind me asking, there was a commentary I think you did a while ago, and you were mentioning that you were doing some stuff with the herbal medicine.
Yeah, Leven Health. So I'm actually a sports advisory board member for Leven Health, and it's a funny story.
Medicinal cannabis.
Yeah, medicinal cannabis, and it's been a bit of a game changer for me because I had the misfortune of I love mountain bike riding, and I've got this ridiculous thing when I get on a mountain bike. I'm a dead set fucking lunatic, to be honest. We've had a couple of rides with Richmond boys that they sit there are horrified as soon as I take them on a ride. But there's up at the Sunshine Coast, there is the old Commonwealth Games mountain bike track there. And so I went there with my brother-in-law and my son. And anyway, it was closed. And I thought, no, we've come all this way. We're jumping the fence. So we jumped the 6-foot fence, threw the bikes over and all that sort of stuff, and had a great time for about an hour and a half. But anyway, my brother-in-law had to go, so it was just me and my son there. And there's beginner, intermediate, and lunatic level, the elite. And so we were just on the intermediate, and I sort of fancy myself as a bit of a rider and all that sort of stuff. And he said, listen, whatever you do, don't go on the elite because there's some jumps there that are just brain numbing. You won't be able to do them and all that sort of stuff. And I'd borrowed a bike. So I'd borrowed one of his teenage daughter's bike sort of thing. So it was like a Huffy Sports or whatever like this. And anyway, so I went for a ride and I said, BJ, my young fella, said last ride. So we went for this ride, and anyway, so the tracks sort of cross over and intertwine to each other. And I was on the intermediate one, and then I saw the sign coming up for the elite trail that was going to the right, and I thought, oh, fuck it. I'm just going to do it. So I've gone up and starting to go on this trail and all this sort of stuff. And anyway, see a jump coming up. So went up on it. So it was one of these ones that's built up on a ramp. And what I didn't realise is you go up on a ramp and then there's an abyss, basically, and then there's another ramp. And so I've sat there and gone up and had no idea of the track and realised about halfway over this abyss, fuck, I'm not going to make this. And so anyway, I've landed half on the ramp, half off the ramp sort of thing, and just knocked myself out. And so woke up, come to, and the bike's a mess and all this sort of stuff. My helmet's all over the place. My sunglasses are broken, and my back, I don't know what the hell I did to my back, but I had to walk out. And anyway, what I've done is I've done some significant damage to my back. So I got my ambitions and my abilities completely mixed up. And anyway, I had significant issues for a long period of time, anti-inflams and all that sort of stuff. And anyway, lo and behold, Mark Brayshaw, who's with got the job at Leven Health, which is the medicinal marijuana, is
former the Coaches Association.
Yeah, great guy. And the reason I got involved was because he's one of those guys, very driven, got a great understanding of how things work. And he said, try this CBD oil. So I've tried it, and it's just put it under my tongue once a day. And yeah, basically it's been a godsend for me. So I don't have anywhere near the back pain that I have. I've still got an awareness of it, but it's sort of like, when you go up from Melbourne and then you go up to Queensland, your body gets in the sun and it feels a hell of a lot better. Well, that's what I feel like, which has been awesome. So it's been a massive turnaround for me.
Is it like obviously it's a drug, but is it like, do you have to get a prescription for it? Is it like a doctor thing? Yeah, you do. And
so look, it's not for everyone, but there's two elements. So the medicinal cannabis is made up of CBD and THC. So CBD is the one they extract, which is anti-inflammatory, helps with anxiety, pain management. So that's the one that I'm on. Yep. Then there's THC, which is sort of a bit of the mind-altering one, if that makes sense. So that's the one that a little bit hallucinogenic. So that one, that I've got too, but that helps me sleep sometimes. So for example, after a game, I won't sleep too well, but I've got a balanced formula, which is a little bit of THC in it, which helps me sleep, which is great. But what it does, it just allows me to take it every single day because it's a natural product instead of popping anti-inflams for the rest of my life, which is great. So it's been a really, really good adaptation of my life, to be fair. It's
incredible. I'm not going to bore you with this shit story, but I through footy had developed this I don't want to say an addiction to anti-inflammatories, but to be honest, I can't think of another word. Like
Yeah.
I just didn't, young kid coming into the system had no idea, just to get fed these pills. Like, they weren't saying take them, but I just thought that's what everyone was doing.
Well, that's what we did.
Well, I used to
back then.
take these big pink ones, the Naprosyn, I think they were called. And one time I was on a footy trip and I was in Thailand, and my teammates like to have this story a fair bit, but I just could not. I was shaking. I didn't doing a lot of drinking on a footy trip, as you do, and I wasn't going to the toilet. Like I couldn't urinate.
Yeah.
So I was like, we're about to go to the PP Islands. And I was like, I do not want to get on this fucking boat. If something's about to happen, I come home. Long story short, I was in hospital for a week. My kidneys had shut down because of the reaction to this, taking too many anti-inflammatories without food and drinking, rotting your gut. So they are extremely dangerous, which I can be aware of.
Yeah, they are. And look, the funny thing about it is now with... Lauren Jackson obviously got the therapeutic use exemption, which is awesome. So she played.
So what's her story? Because she's obviously come back at 40 years of age. With she had terrible injuries.
Terrible injuries, and basically, had tried everything like your story, anti-inflams and all that sort of stuff, but then found the medicinal cannabis, the THC formula that Levin had been, and then, basically worked through to get this therapeutic use exemption, which allowed her to play again, which is awesome. And that to me, I think is the biggest one for AFL that I think will eventually come in where the players will start to use this, because it is a natural product. It's not made as such from compounds and all that sort of stuff. And I think it's going to have incredible benefit. And, Levin have got some research with Dr. Peter Bruckner that's through La Trobe University, I think it is, are doing a lot of research now. And, I think it's going to become bigger and bigger, which is really exciting, and especially when players won't be having to use, such things as that. So, like I said, it's not for everyone, but, I went to a guy by the name of Dr. James Stewart that sort of helped and went through a really diligent process to figure out, this is going to help you for sure. So it's been incredible for me.
I had no idea it was so stringent, the process that goes through, but I think it's one of those things as well, until it gets probably normalised, there's that stigma around it of just, the guy just smoking marijuana in his house.
And it's a laugh. And I used to have the joke with the players, because when they heard
what would you have thought when you were, back in the day?
I was the same as everyone else. I used to always think that, guys would be up the back of the coach's box, and the players did with me, smoking bongs at the back to get my medicinal cannabis in. But it's nothing like that. It's an oil, which is good. But it was funny. The players, when at first, they still have a joke about it, sort of thing. Send me bloody photos of me with face on bloody Bob Marley's kits and all that sort of stuff. So, but that was the reason I got really involved, is to get rid of the stigma, because I'm probably like everyone else. As soon as you hear of marijuana, you automatically think of this guy walking down a street with a Bob Marley bag, sort of thing. But this is really groundbreaking. I think it's going to become a big thing in professional sports.
Speaking of the physical benefits, but what you mentioned before about the benefits you've had personally for like your own, you said anxiety before. Is that something that you've looked at post footy, post everything? Like, how in touch with your own mental side of your game are you? And has that been an evolution of yourself? Yeah,
absolutely. It's one of the biggest things I found, because footy was all consuming. And once again, the 2016 was the big pivot point for me, where I thought, I can't do this job if I'm going to go down this path. And it's funny, I have the Dimmer's Daily Philosophy to Happiness motto, which is there's 5 things. Now, I'm not going to get to do all 5, but there's 5 things that, regardless of the day I have, that will make me happy. First thing in the morning, it's to sit down and have a coffee. It's to walk my dog. It's to read and journal. It's to spend time with my partner, and it's to exercise. Now, there are 5 things that, no matter how crap a day or how shit a day I had, if I manage to tick off 4 of those things, it's going to make me feel like I've had some success for the day. Because the reality is, life at various stages is very fucking hard. And so I needed something else that would take my mind away from this, but also give me some things that I felt like I'd had some success. Well, you know what? You walk the dog. Well, you read, you improved yourself, you journaled, you wrote about your feelings, you wrote about the things that made you feel good. And it's funny, those journal entries, and I'm just starting to go back and reflect now, I write every day. So I sort of wrote down some things that, either something I've learned, which is a story that I might use at some stage, or I'll write down my feelings about how I'm feeling, or some things that I'm going to do to make my life better or my day better overall. And it's amazing how if you write it down, it becomes therapeutic in nature. So that was sort of one of the big things that I gravitate to now. And, I'll go home and there'll be 3 or 4 of those notebooks around where I'll sit there and I'll journal at various stages just about how I'm feeling and what I'm going to do. List making is a big one for me as well.
Yeah, I'm a big list guy, big reminders guy, like app, calendars, and massive one too. We spoke about earlier about knowing what you're doing. But I must admit for me, mate, like the biggest challenge I definitely, and I'm only realising it now, nearly 2 years out, isn't the camaraderie, it's not the team stuff, but it's having the routine and it's having the fitness. And I think when you go from doing something your whole life, you don't realise how much until that's gone. And it's not scheduled, you're not getting paid to work out anymore. Yeah. It is really, really challenging. And I know, I see my psych, I see these people, the first thing they ask me is, are you running? Are you burning calories?
And that's the thing, it just, dopamine, it creates that feel-good sort of thing. And that's the one thing that, I love. So it's nearly the first thing, like I said, I haven't of lately, but I'm normally 5 o'clock. I'll have my coffee, meet my coffee guy, have a chat about him. It's like a Seinfeld episode as well. I got the Kramer in the corner, and he's open at 4:30, so we have a good old chat. And then I'll go into work and I'll journal and read, and then I'll do exercise at 6. So then by 6, by the time the players are in there, I've achieved 3 things already, which makes me feel great.
I've got to picture something, maybe off air, but I've got a concept I think you'll like.
Yeah.
I hope you'll like. So I don't want to play footy anymore. I love my weekends. Okay, I want to play golf, spend time with the family, do the things much like you were talking about, walk, do all those bits. Footy, don't want to have that weekend. It just takes up too much time, and I don't want to get hurt. Like I seriously, I really don't want to have any injuries. But the one thing I miss the most is being a part of a team, the banter, all those bits and pieces. So I'm genuinely coming up with creating my own football club that is purely training. And I want to go out, train. Once a month, we'll have a session as well. It can be on mental health or anything that we talk about. Could be medicinal cannabis, just to educate people on different things. So you get that footy club, you're bettering yourself. There's a social part of it, but we need a coach.
Yeah.
And we need a coach. And you're out of a job.
Might be right.
Yeah, you might be the right guy that could come down for a few sessions, because I want it to be literally you rock up. It's not just having fun, because a part of routine is something you don't want to do sometimes, and I'm fully aware that there has to be things in there that aren't always enjoyable, because they're the part of things that teams that make it you bond. You hate the coach together because there's shit in there that you don't want to do. So I'm not going to say that all the drills are going to be fun. There's going to be some things that we don't want to do. Pre-season is actually going to be a pre-season, it's running, it's fitness, it's those bits and pieces.
Well, it's funny, pre-season is sort of and the players would say this is the best part of training.
It is.
Because you're not measured on the outcome, because there's no games.
Like an Adonis as well.
And it's warm. It's generally warm, there's something in that. I reckon it's not a bad one.
Okay, we'll talk off air. I'm not getting a commitment straight away from you, but I think there's something there. Hey, mate, you've been incredible today. Just to finish up, one thing I'd love to discuss.
Yep.
You said before you're a big reader.
Yep.
Can you give us some recommendations on books? If anyone out there wants to read a book, what's been something for you that you've just gone, this is a fantastic read?
Yeah, it's a good one.
And why?
Yeah.
Fictional, education, what are you
into? I'm reading the Boys of Winter at the moment, which is about the 1980 US Olympic ice hockey team, which there's a great movie made with Kurt Russell in it. Believe, I think it was, a Disney movie, which is really good. It's just about the Russians were a dominant hockey side back then, hadn't lost or hadn't won 7 gold medals in a row, and Kurt Russell basically changed the way that ice hockey was played throughout the USA to try and beat them, wanted to beat them at their own game. And it's a really, really good read just about the role a coach has and the challenge with his players. Because, coaching is quite challenging, because you sort of want players to – you want to be respected and you want to be liked, but you sort of can't be too much of one and not enough of the other, if that makes sense. And he had a really good analogy in there. He sort of said – what you want to do is you want to have great assistance, and which is important, but you also want the fact that you want the players to be a little bit worried about walking into your office, sort of thing. They want to feel comfortable. They want to feel nervous at the same time. Where, all right, I'm going to go to the assistant, sort of thing, because you've got to sort of still have that. You still got to be able to put a little bit of fear in them, if that makes sense. And the very best ones. And so that book's really, really good. The other one I'm reading at the moment is More Than a Game. Phil Jackson, I reckon, is an incredible coach. I love reading a lot of his stuff. So I I read like 3 books at a time, which is really weird. So at certain spaces in my houses, I've got, all right, if I want to read The Boys of Winter, I go to the study at the front. Bedroom's more of a game. And then I've also got the last season, which is out in my shed, believe it or not. Another one about Phil Jackson, because what he did really well is he coached the Bulls, obviously, to great success. And then he left the Bulls and then he went to the Lakers and coached them with great success as well. So I thought, I want to see what he's done if I do decide to go back into coaching. Yeah. What are some things I can get? So, and one of the skills that I've decided to try and improve is the meditation and mindfulness space. It's something that, I've been very fortunate to work with Erin Murray, who's a star at that.
Star.
And when she came in, I thought, oh, God, we're howling at the moon. What are we doing here? But that's been something that has been groundbreaking for me and something I still am not great at, but I want to get great at. So that's sort of something I'm trying to bring another skill set into mine moving forward.
I love that. I want to. I'm going to get you a book that I've read.
Yep.
I mention it every week. Darcy's going to laugh because I haven't read many books. So when you find one that you just recommend to everyone, it's called The Mountain Is You by Brianna Wiest. Weist. I'm going to read. I think you'd really enjoy it. Okay. You'd really like it. One other thing, just on the analogy of the coaching that you said before about people being scared of you. Not being scared of you, but having that,
having a little bit
there.
Yeah.
It comes back to a really incredible analogy that I spoke about recently that I'd learnt from a coach, and it was a player and coach relationship. Because at the end of the day, you don't, as much as it's about relationships, it's not about who you like, it's about who you respect. Exactly. And that's something that I really stuffed up in my footy career, and I speak about it a lot. I wanted to be liked way too much. It wasn't about being respected. As much as I wanted that, but I was just too worried about what people thought of me versus what I actually did, and was too young, didn't realise a lot of things. Anyway, the part that really stuck with me once I left was Darren Harris, who was a coach at Carlton at the time, and he asked me a question one day about like who out of the team would I go to war with? Yeah. And I was picked at my mates, and he goes, but would they be the ones that you'd actually go to war with? And I was like, oh, fuck, no. They wouldn't be the ones that I'd go to war with. I'd go to war with the captain, these 3 guys. And then he asked me, would anyone go to war with you? Yeah. And I was like, no, not at the moment they wouldn't. And that really hurt me. I was like, they wouldn't. So I think for me, once I realised that, it changed a lot in the way I reacted. And it wasn't, I don't want my mates to always, as much as I'd love to go for beer with them, have laugh and be out till 5 a.m. in the morning, I would love for them to do that. But it's also, I'd rather be the guy that they call when shit hits the fan. Yeah. And I think that's a relationship that you want to nail as a coach.
I think one of the things that players always got to know you got their back. Yeah. I think one of the things that one of my strengths was I would always go into bat for my boys, sort of thing. And
even when you were probably wrong, do you reckon?
Yeah, absolutely. But
did you know that?
Yeah, but that's what galvanises playing groups, if that makes sense. And I wanted to be the guy, and I was sort of a little bit like that when I played as well. I'm going to think, he's going to kick the shit out of me, this guy. But as long as I have a crack, I might get punched along the way. I remember bloody Jason McCartney punched me one day. I was like, Jesus Christ, if he hits me, he's going to kill me here. But it's just important players see that, the fact that, I was prepared to wear anything I copped, provided the players knew, you know what, mate, I'll always have your back, sort of thing. I'll always have, the boys in one way or another, because that's what good footy clubs do. And, Brendan Gale and Peggy O'Neill and all those guys always had my back. So I'll do the same for the players.
I remember there was one that stands out that you did, and I remember literally thinking about it going, I don't even reckon he actually agrees with it, but the fact that I know by you doing this, the more it's going to galvanise you guys as a group. Yeah. That's all that really matters in the end of it. It's just the fact that you had their back, not the fact that the situation was there.
Then, players always make mistakes, and we're always quick to jump on them. But the fact of the matter is, everything's a learning opportunity along the way. So, it's a good challenge.
Can I tell you one more thing? Sorry, I know you've...
It's not about you.
Yeah.
It's not about me.
I know it is about you. I'm very Jack Brewald of me right now, isn't it?
That's very, very good.
Sorry. Yeah. One more thing that I reckon you'd like is... There was an analogy. Now, I'm not going to pretend that I've read the book. I definitely haven't. But I know there is a book about this. I watched the YouTube short video about coaching, and it was the English cycling team. And they spoke about, have you heard of it? Marginal gains. Yeah. I thought you'd already heard of it.
Yeah,
but
it's good.
It's incredible, isn't it? They look at the tyres, they look at the chains, they take mattresses to different hotels and looked at those tiny little bit.
Anything to get the 1%.
Anything to get the 1%. So I thought that was
It's very good. And that's the thing. Reading to me it's something that I loved as a kid. I went away from, but now I've got back into, and it's one of the things that just re-engages the mind. And, for any coach out there, it's amazing the stories you can get from from just reading. You know, you can sit there and listen to things on
Podcasts.
No, not podcasts, but, you know,
Yeah.
audio books and that. But there's something special about actually turning a page and highlighting, and it's like writing as well. Writing to me is very, very therapeutic. You know, you can type, but if you actually sit there and take the time to write, you take it in more. God, my writing, it's amazing how you lose the art of writing. But, you know, it's funny. One of my good mates, he wrote me a letter the other day. I said, I can't even read it, sort of thing, because everyone's used to typing these days. But, you know, those sort of things are quite special.
Yeah, the reading of just turning over a book, a page. I bought a Kindle because I thought it'd be easier.
Yeah.
And it's like I hate it because I'm not getting the satisfaction out of going, I'm halfway through. Yeah. You don't know where you are actually in the book.
And it's like records. Records are the same. That's why I give players records, because you know, you can buy music and it's on Spotify, but you know, to pull it out and actually put it on the record player, it actually takes time and effort, not just play. So
I'll have to show you the collection when we finish up. But one other thing I love about records that I know that you'll love is the fact, and this sounds very, very dumb of me because I'm sure that you would, a lot of people know this that listen to music, but at New Age, I don't think we do understand this is the fact an album is actually put together for a reason in terms of like this song's here and then that song's there for a reason. And I think like as a younger generation, we don't know that because it's just singles. We listen to songs, we can skip them. But when you actually put a vinyl on, you go, fuck, that's a reason you've actually set the album up like this.
Exactly. And that's the thing that I think we're after instant gratitude now. So we just go to the good songs.
Yeah, go to the chorus.
You've got to go to that. You've got to go through the songs where the artist has had to write another one about a certain phase of his life to get to the really good ones. So, yeah, I think that's a cool thing about records. And, you know, when you sit there and, you know, I bought this book about, I can't remember what it's called actually, but about the greatest 100 albums and talks about why they made the album and the songs on it. It was actually a very cool read. God, I'm shocking with remembering that stuff at the moment. But anyway.
We'll have to send it in.
Yeah.
I'll get absolutely sculpted by, I don't know if that's a word actually, I'll get absolutely fucking murdered by the whole community if I don't ask you this. Coaching.
Yes.
Football. Where does it sit with you at the moment? Where's your head at? Do you want to get back into footy, do you think? Can you see yourself coaching in another club?
I'd be lying if I said I couldn't see myself doing it. I love it. I miss it. You know, I've been out for 2 weeks and I wanted to miss it if that made sense. Yeah. But I need to decompress for a while. I need to go away. I need to reflect, figure out things that make me good and things that I can sit there and put me into dark places as well. So I need a bit of time, but I just love the game. You know, it's the one thing I've sit there and like everyone, you know, I've known it for a long time, but, you know, I'll go overseas and I'll still watch the Tigers play and I'll still watch other games as much as I can. And, you know, at some stage I'll probably step back in. When that is, I'm not too sure.
That's so exciting. That's exciting, man.
I'm not too sure.
We're not really like, I don't do like news scoops or anything, but like that's probably as exciting as it gets for us. That, you know, I appreciate your honesty. Like, the game needs you in it. It's going to be cool to see what happens over the next sort of period. If it's next year.
It is. And look, I think you know, for me, a new challenge and whatever that looks like, I'm not too sure. But you know, things are exciting like that. But like I said, I just need some time to step away and rediscover what makes me good and makes me bad, and go from there. Reflection is really key.
I'm excited for you, man. It's
Thanks.
really cool.
Thanks
really
for having me on. It's been good, actually.
I really, really appreciate it. It's going to be cool to see. If you need any sort of VFL top-up players or anything like that, like, you just let me know, man. I'll be there to come in.
Oh, well, I just didn't like your answer about I just don't want to get hurt.
No, well,
hey,
you know.
Hey, you can't say that.
Brett Delidio, you know, they'll play like...
Don't bring him in.
No, I'm joking.
We still wear it a long sleeve,
Hey,
Brett.
just until we finish, Brett Delidio, I told you about how I dominated him on the G that time.
Yes.
And you would know that being the coach at that time. Do you remember me dominating him on the G?
I did. I distinctly remember saying, get out to Brett Delidio. He said, you're getting beaten by fucking Dylan Buckley, for God's sake. Get it done.
Fantastic.
One of the great men, Lids.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, mate.